Welcome to Lynn Cancer Institute updates for 2025. We have important information for everyone from our nutrition series today. We will be hearing from our very own oncology clinical dietitian, Marie Morandi, and she'll be educating us on the ever popular healthy gut. I know that it's one that I look forward to every year. At the Lynn Cancer Institute, we believe that nutrition is the basis of healthy living for our patients and survivors, as well as prevention for all of us. During this presentation, your Zoom will be muted. And in the interest of time, Marie's bio was sent to you by email. We ask you to please take notes, although Marie is very good about sharing her slides after the presentation. But take notes, and if you have any questions, please jot them down in the chat box or the Q&A box, and Marie will have time at the end of her presentation to address any of your questions. So thank you. We're ready, Marie. We're very proud to have you with us and very grateful. Marie Morandi.
Oh, thank you very much, Jan. Such a wonderful introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today to talk about a healthy gut. So we want to talk about today what is the gut microbiome, because we hear that a lot in health education lectures. What influence does the microbiome have on our health? And what influences the growth of a healthy microbiome, and if there is any influence or how it affects people on with cancer or on cancer treatments. So we have a lot to cover today. Today we're going to start with the gut microbiome, and our microbiome is a collection of trillions of bacteria species that live symbiotically in the human gut. So the number of bacteria cells actually outnumber our cells by a factor of 10. So we have a whole universe of bacteria basically living in our gut. And what I find interesting is so many people probably associate bacteria with something bad, infections or sickness or illness, but that's not the case at all when it comes to the bacteria that survive and thrive in our gut. It can happen that we get what's called dysbiose, which is an imbalance of the gut bacteria, and that can be linked to problems. But that is not a healthy gut. An imbalance of gut bacteria has been linked to IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, obesity, diabetes. So encouraging and supporting the microbe richness and diversity is linked to many health outcomes, including mental health, which surprisingly, because we're talking about our gastrointestinal tract, but it does have an effect on our brains and our mental health, in addition to weight management, which is kind of an emerging topic, and chronic diseases. So there is an interesting, we use probiotic word. What is a probiotic? Pretty loosely in media, in our discussions, and the actual definition of a probiotic is a live microorganism that, when administered in an adequate amount, can confer a health benefit on the host. So the microorganisms have to stay alive. So they must kind of survive the process of making the food item, storing, shelf life, and consumption. And then that adequate amount is measured by colony forming units. And you probably hear that with talk about probiotic supplements and pills and things like that. They list the colony forming units, the more the better, so to speak, as far as the number of bacteria able to divide from that supplement. But there also has to be documented by scientific research to demonstrate a health benefit. So there is a difference a little bit there by definition between our live cultures, our microorganisms, our bacteria, microbes that are in a food or in our population or supported in our gut versus a probiotic. So just kind of be aware of that. Interesting. But when we talk about all of the little healthy bacteria, the microbes in our gut, that when we mean by a symbiotic relationship is that we both get benefit. They get benefit of a host, a place to live and thrive. They receive fuel from us so that they can grow. And we are provided with vitamins, amino acids, and health benefits. So they are able to perform functions in the human gut that we can't. So they produce some vitamins. They synthesize amino acids. They can transform and change the bile. The intestinal cells interact with our microorganisms and influence our immune system. The bacteria will bind and signal the immune system in the gut and then in the gut cells. And as I mentioned, they receive fuel. So they metabolize and digest the carbohydrates, or actually they can metabolize, digest anything that we're eating. But their preference for the healthy gut would be those digestible carbohydrates. Actually, the ones that we can't digest. So they're going to digest the fiber, the polysaccharides, the resistant starch, the cellulose, the things in the food that will pass through that we can't digest. So it provides recovery of energy and nutrients for their growth. They actually the good bacteria that we want in our gut produce antimicrobial compounds to compete with the pathogens. So like we said, there's good and bad, but they're going to keep the bad under control. They're going to keep the things like C. difficile, things like that under control so that we don't get some of those illnesses. And as I mentioned, they provide a gut to brain communication that can influence how the gut functions and our response to our stress, and can influence the mind as far as stress goes. So we mentioned they're going to produce some vitamins, so vitamin B12, thiamine, folate, riboflavin, vitamin K, all very important vitamins, I'm sure that you know, for our overall health and functioning. As much as maybe 20% of circulating amino acids like lysine, leucine, and threonine in adults are synthesized by the gut microbes. In addition, they're involved in urea nitrogen salvaging, so picking up the nitrogen from protein metabolism and returning it back and reusing it. So all very important functions that the microbiome provides for us and for itself. So as I mentioned, they're going to use what we're eating basically as fuel source. So, and they're going to ferment that. So they're going to ferment indigestible carbohydrates into what's called a byproduct. So it's short chain fatty acids is the most predominant. So butyrate would be one of those short chain fatty acids, and that's an energy source for our colon cells. It can also induce apoptosis, which if you've listened to any of our other lectures, we know that that's cell death. That's cell death of cells that aren't good or aren't functional, and very important in cancer prevention. So it's going to induce apoptosis for colon cancer cells or bad cells and maintain oxygen balance and help to prevent that dysbiose that we talked about. Propionate transfers to the liver and can regulate satiety. So one of those short chain fatty acids from fermenting that indigestible carbohydrates is going to help us feel full. Satiety is our feeling of fullness or satisfaction with eating and keeps us from wanting more food. Acetate may also regulate appetite, and also important in weight management and all of that, and influence cholesterol and lipid regulation. So again, one of the reasons why it's good for our heart and chronic disease, and it is also used by the skeleton and cardiac muscle as fuel. So essentially, the more short chain fatty acids that we can produce, we can control obesity, have less insulin resistance, and overall kind of better health. as I said, what the microbiome is fermenting makes a difference. So if we're eating too much meat and dairy instead of those undigestible carbohydrates, it's going to ferment and produce trimethylamine, which is oxidized by the liver, and it has been associated with increased risk of atherosclerosis. So again, not a good outcome. If we have a high fat diet, it contributes to lipid lipopolysaccharides that can go across the gut barrier and increase inflammation. So again, not a good outcome, especially if people are kind of prone to that IBS or leaky gut or any of that kind of stuff. So when we're fermenting our dietary fiber, we produce that indole propionate and the butyrate, potent radical scavenging activity, which reduces the risk of diabetes. Free radical scavenging is important in cancer prevention as well. So all very good outcomes. So butyrate has anti-inflammatory effects and maintains our gut barrier and reduces oxidative stress in the gut. So again, healthy gut from the fermentation of those non-digestible carbohydrates and fats and not fats, fibers, what we're going to get from that healthy diet. Now, obesity and diabetes, how does this relate to our healthy gut? There seems to be a relationship between a dysbiose or altered microbiota in obese versus a normal weight. In this case, it was a study on mice. So studies in obese mice showed a preference to a type of bacteria called Firmicutes versus the bacteroidetes. And Firmicutes are very efficient in extracting energy from the food we eat. So we actually get more energy and more calories from the foods we eat versus not. And they're more prone to obesity risk. This ratio, this preference to those type of bacteria can be altered when we restrict the fat in the diet, or we restrict the carbohydrate in the diet, or we undergo the intermittent fasting. So that's part of the reason why these types of diets are going to be helpful in managing weight. Studies have found during times of fasting the increase of these bacteroidetes versus these other type of microbes. So production of the short-chain fatty acids from the microbiota relate to the signaling along the gut for satisfaction with our meals, satiety, or feeling of fullness, and regulation of our appetite, our food intake. Gut composition of study patients with diabetes showed some dysbiose and decrease in short-chain fatty acid production. And I wonder, though, what first came first, the chicken or the egg in this one, because so many people with diabetes stop eating carbohydrates. They may stop eating even high fiber carbohydrates. So they may be eating more fat and protein, which can cause maybe even some of that dysbiose, or if that dysbiose is causing the diabetes. So a low microbiota diversity has been correlated also with weight gain. So as I mentioned, the gut also talks to the brain and back. Stress has been shown to influence the integrity of the gut. And a lot of people, if they've had any kind of IBS or those type of symptoms, know that when they are worried or anxious or stressed or something's going on in their life, they're going to have more GI symptoms. And this is why it's influencing the peristalsis, the movement of the gut, the secretions that happen in our gut, and the mucin that's produced, and increasing inflammation and damage to the gut. So, of course, managing stress is going to be a big factor in a healthy gut. Probiotic consumption has also been reported to reduce some of these self-reported feelings of sadness and aggressive thoughts, which is very interesting. It's like we can influence the probiotics or the microbiota in the microbiome and feel better, which is a very interesting outcome. So there are many pathways for communication between the gut and the brain. Alterations in cytokines, alteration in hormones, the short chain fatty acids themselves or changes in neurotransmitters. So the short chain fatty acids can get into the bloodstream and cross the blood-brain barrier and affect the brain and brain development. So that's also an important thing. Establishing a good microbiome in infants can have a difference in brain development. Our microbiome through fiber fermentation and fermented foods may be linked to better brain health. So there was a little study that looked into this. They have found that fermented foods, which we'll talk about in a bit, increase the diversity of microbes in the gut bacteria, which produces neuroactive, bioactive microbial metabolites, polyphenols, which we get from food also, and vitamins. And this was shown to decrease age-related cognitive decline, decrease social anxiety, and decrease stress. And then they looked at fiber-rich foods, which increase the richness of the gut bacteria. We're still producing those short-chain fatty acids, those bioactive byproducts. We have our polyphenols, we have our vitamins. We're still decreasing age-related cognitive decline. We can improve mood, we can improve verbal memory, attention, and satiety. So both very positive results from this kind of study. Richness is simply the count or the amount of different types of microbes. The diversity considers not only the number of species, but also how equally they are represented in the biome. So we talked a little bit about irritable bowel syndrome. So again, how does this gut microbiome affect our health? Irritable bowel syndrome is characterized by abdominal pain, discomfort, change in bowel habits. It's influenced by a lot of different factors. Inflammation is a big factor, genetics, of course, sensitivity to foods, infection or history of infection, and our microbiome. So alteration in the composition of the gut probiotic bacteria may facilitate adherence of pathogens and develop IBS symptoms. So that dysbiose, those bad bacteria again, can influence the development. So many people with IBS are started on medication to reduce the inflammation, to help manage their symptoms, because of course this is a significant medical concern. So when people are started on vedolizumab, those people with a diverse microbiome to start by week 14 had clinical remission. The butyrate producing bacteria at baseline specifically were higher in those achieving remission. So in case of people with IBS, diet restriction of specific carbohydrate sources may alleviate symptoms. So, well, first we want to kind of support a good microbiome, but there has been a lot of interest in this new diet recommendation for people with IBS, which is called a low FODMAP diet. And this low FODMAP diet restricts specific types of carbohydrates, basically oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, which are usually very short chain carbohydrates that are easily to be absorbed. So it's believed that when people with IBS, with all this inflammation, with all this damage, can malabsorb these simple sugars and contribute to too much fermentation by the colon and too much overstimulation of these free fatty acids and overstimulation of the bowel. So the low FODMAP diet is designed to help manage these symptoms and reduce the amount of these very simple carbohydrates, simple sugars in the diet. This actually includes gluten for these for this diet, lactose, so low gluten, low lactose, and specific fruit and vegetables. Can't go into the complete details on this diet because it's very complex. There are books and a lot of charts and a lot of information on the web about the low FODMAP diet, what's on, what's off, things like that. So if you're very interested in something like that, I would definitely research this more. And the one thing with this diet is, one, you want to be very strict with it, and you want to be strict for about, let's say, at least 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. Evaluate your symptoms. How are you doing? If it's been effective. It hasn't been effective, then it's not something that would be good for you. But if it has, then you kind of know something that will help make you feel better, basically. So there's a lot of talk also about what's called leaky gut, which is actually a very controversial term. Some people don't think this is a diagnosis or a real thing. Some doctors do. And those who do, leaky gut refers to a reduction in the tight junctions between cells of the GI tract, which allow microbes, bad microbes usually, and foreign material through the cells, causing inflammation. So let's say our gut is, nice and tightly packed. Well, if I have a little space here, things can just kind of fly through instead of going through the normal channels through our skin. So that's basically what they're saying is, and a lot of things can influence that GI, the junctions between cells. Factors that they find that contribute to leaky gut, H. pylori, which is the microbe that has been associated with gastritis and ulcers. Gluten, for those who are gluten celiac sensitive. Alcohol can cause problems with these tight junctions. Stress, age, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, maybe even vitamin D deficiency, because vitamin D does act as a helper in maintaining the tight junction. So all of this can contribute to that leaky gut. So again, colorectal cancer risk, dysbiose from infections, antibiotic use have been linked to colon cancer. Several byproducts of gut microbiota directly target the intestinal epithelial cells. It can either increase risk or decrease risk. So again, it depends on what we're eating and what we're fermenting and how that is going to influence the health of our colon cells. Alterations in the gut have influenced cancers of the breast, liver, due to the inflammatory and metabolic influence that our microbiome. So there's a lot of reasons to want to be aware and support a healthy gut. Interestingly enough, even when people are on cancer treatments, the microbiome can have an effect. Treatments can affect our microbiome. Treatments can affect the amount and richness and diversity of our bacteria. Treatments can be toxic, of course. So it can cause or promote this dysbiose. For example, radiation therapy, transplants, the chemotherapy, irinotecan, 5-FU, can be toxic to the gut microbiome and exert unwanted side effects. So our gut microbiota may also influence efficacy of some chemos. So an irinotecan, opportunistic gut bacteria, because we're causing this dysbiose, can reactivate the cell and cause more problems. It can also, dysbiose can add to or cause graft versus host disease to be worse. So it is important to be kind of aware and support as best we can the healthy gut, even during chemotherapy treatments. Now, on the other side of this, the microbiome may help to shape the immune system, and that may actually help to complement immunotherapy treatment. So people who were on immunotherapy treatment for metastatic melanoma, the anti-PD-F1 checkpoint blockade, the immunotherapies, they found that when they had the most diverse gut microbiome, had better response, up to 5 times more likely to have a better response to that immune therapy. And that was found with a high fiber diet. So in these people, they didn't find that the ones taking probiotics had the most diverse gut. They found that those who had a high fiber diet produced the most diverse gut microbiome, and they're the ones that had the better response to their immune therapy. So that diversity was associated with the high fiber diet. Other studies with immunotherapy found poor effectiveness in people who recently took antibiotics. So if you've had antibiotics, of course, we know kind of can disrupt or wipe out some of the good bacteria in our guts, along with whatever other infection that we may be taking the antibiotic for. And many people have had that effect from antibiotics. They'll get diarrhea, and that's usually associated because of that dysbiose that it can cause an alteration in the microbiome. So being aware, if you're going to start immunotherapy, and I actually did this with a family member recently, it would be great if you can start a high fiber diet prior to starting, because we have found that even just a few days of a diet change can improve the gut microbiome. We don't need a huge amount of time. We want to be consistent and stay on it, but even within a few days, you can see a difference. So there has been a lot of conversation, a lot of questions about managing GI distress on treatment. So very quickly, I wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of how we're going to manipulate diets based on side effects to treatment. So real quickly, some treatments, people for cancer, people will develop constipation, or constipation is an issue that impacts how treatment is given or how they tolerate it. Sometimes people develop too much gas, which can be a side effect of treatment itself, or become a problem, especially like on radiation therapy or something like that. And then some of our cancer treatments can cause diarrhea. So there are diet changes that we're going to do to manage these kind of GI distress issues. So for constipation, we can pretty much choose any high fiber foods. Okay. If that's the only issue, if there's not an issue with gas, there's not an issue with anything else, then we're going to choose the foods that are going to stimulate the bowels and move things through our guts. So prunes, prune juice, beans, any, cabbage blends for sure, any dried fruit, apples, pears, dragon fruit, kiwi, our whole grains, especially because our white, low fiber products cause constipation. And then our healthy fats, because oil is a lubricant, so it's going to help move things through. So we want a little bit extra avocado or olives or nuts or seeds. Now, some of those foods can cause a lot of gas. They can be gas producing. So if that is a problem, I would say no prunes, but prune juice would be okay. Maybe not the dried fruit, maybe not the cruciferous vegetable or the raw vegetables, but the inside of an apple, so peeled, the inside of a pear, our oats, okay, pumpernickel, flax or chia seeds, the potatoes, and then melon and berries and mango and papaya. And you think about it, we only eat the flesh of those fruits. So we're not dealing with the hard, coarse skins, which are more likely to be more fermented in the gut, and we're focusing on the softer inside, the soluble fiber, as we would call it, versus the insoluble. And when we're having diarrhea, we're going to be a little bit even more careful. We're going to choose mostly soluble fiber from the oats, the banana, the cooked apples, rather than just a peeled apple, applesauce, barley. Cooked vegetables are still fine, but still without those cruciferous, still without the broccoli and cauliflower and all that kind of stuff. White rice in this case, oat bread, oatmeal, quinoa would still be good, potatoes still with no skins, and more nut butters rather than nuts, and still the kind of the same fruits, but maybe not high fat, because sometimes that can kind of add to some of the diarrhea as well. I would say if you're on cancer treatments and having a lot of GI distress, it's very important to talk with one of a dietitians. It would kind of individualize this because there's a lot of different factors that influence what we're going to suggest that you eat and not eat, depending on specifically what's going on with you individually. So, seek out a dietitian if you're having any of these distress. So let's kind of move on to the food and how we're going to support the gut microbiota, because we've talked about all of the different benefits that we're going to get from a healthy gut. We're going to get benefits to our brain. We're going to get benefits to the gut, to the colon cells, to even weight management, to stress levels, all of that kind of stuff. Hopefully prevent some cancers and support better tolerance to treatment itself. So foods that are bad for the microbiome, we've talked in the past about processed foods, and we've talked a lot about that earlier in the year, and that's going to apply here. Our artificial sweeteners, our processed foods, the additive, the dyes, the salt, all that kind of thing, that chemicals that go into processed foods, the added sugar, sugar being of simple sugar that fuels yeast, it fuels bacteria, overgrowth, these kind of things. If a person is sensitive to gluten, that could cause damage to the gut for sure. Red meat, high fat dairy may contribute if we're eating too much of that and not enough of the good stuff. There's always a balance when it comes to diet. So some things can be worked in small quantities on that plant-based diet that we always talk about. The foods that help our microbiome, that help our gut: artichokes, leeks, onions, garlic. If you're not extra sensitive, as onions and garlic are on that low FODMAP diet, but they are high in inulin and they can be very good for supporting the gut microbiome. They're considered prebiotics. Bone broth, glutamine, collagen, all that kind of stuff can be good for our guts. Fermented foods, we'll talk about foods high in fiber to stimulate that diversity. Foods high in omega-3 fats, turmeric, mushrooms, green tea, everything that we kind of always talk about being anti-inflammatory. Nuts, seeds, berries are healthy fats from olives and olive oil. The broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, or cruciferous vegetables are good to support our gut biome if you're tolerating it and it's not producing too much GI distress. Coffee and tea, but especially green tea, for the polyphenols as anti-inflammatory agents to reduce inflammation in the gut. And as we mentioned, intermittent fasting may be a good way of resting the gut over a period of time overnight and supporting kind of the gut bacteria, the recovery, all that kind of stuff. And it's been shown to be helpful with weight management itself. There is, if you were going to do probiotic supplements, the Lactobacillus plantarum, which is one species of lactobacillus, and the bifidobacterium have been shown to be helpful in a healthy gut. And both of those are found in the supplement VSL number 3 in the probiotic. And you can search that on the web and go to that website. They have a few different products there. So that is kind of one of the probiotic supplements that we talk about a lot. We talked about fuel for the microbes and prebiotics, and we talked about all of the food: beans, whole grains, artichokes, onions, dark chocolate, because it is anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant. Kiwi is great, nuts and seeds, cashews, pistachios, oats. But on supplement products or in foods, you'll find the words the lacto-oligosaccharides, fructo-oligosaccharides, chicory root fiber, inulin, partially hydrogenated guar gum, xylo-oligosaccharides. These are types of fiber that will be put into foods that act as a prebiotic. So it can be good for the gut, in those foods. So that's what you'll find. But foods that can help support that diversity, some more foods we talked about: oats, pumpernickel, barley. These are also sources of resistant starches. Resistant starches is a term where certain parts of the starch in a food, not quite considered a fiber, but becomes resistant to digestion. And that can be oats, it can be pumpernickel, it can be part of the seeds, legumes, peas, corn, all of that hold resistant starches. The green bananas have resistant starch, and you'll lose that as they ripen. But here's an interesting fact. If you cook potatoes or cook rice, okay, and then cool it, let's say we meal prep, we cook the day before, we put everything in our little containers, we put them in the refrigerator, we're creating resistant starches in those potatoes and rice for the next time that we cook that, which is very interesting. It can be less of an effect on our blood sugars, better fuel for the gut microbiome. And I've actually also heard recently that the same thing may happen when you put bread in the freezer and then bring it back out and eat it again. The same thing may also happen. So these resistant starches can pass through digestion, they can feed the good bacteria, and they can support that short-chain fatty acid butyrate production. And of course, other high fiber foods, peas, our broccoli, our greens, our Brussels sprouts, our berries, any type of berry, pears and apples, carrots, chia seeds, and quinoa. I have been enjoying the chia seed pudding phenomenon recently, and making chia seed pudding with a little bit of oat or almond milk, a little bit of berries, throwing a little honey on top has been a very nice way, and it's very high fiber. So we're going to get a lot of fiber from chia seeds. You're going to get some protein from chia seeds. So it's a very nice way of adding fiber and protein to, I've added it to oatmeal, overnight oats, done the same thing. I've added some chia seeds to the overnight oats, and it's a good way of getting some extras. So keep these kind of things in mind. So our goal to support that diversity is eat that high fiber diet, full of prebiotics. We're going to support the growth of those bacteria in our gut, and fermented foods. We're looking for at least 30 grams of fiber, but if you're getting up to 40, gradually, preferably, be careful. You do want to make sure you're drinking a lot of water. These fibers aren't going to be helpful if they don't have the water, especially our soluble fiber absorbs water in gel. So if there's not enough water in the gut, it's going to absorb it from the cells of the gut, and it's not going to be good, or it's going to create very hard stools. So make sure you're drinking plenty of water. So dark leafy greens, we want to cook with onions, garlic, soybeans, artichokes, everything that we talked about. Cherries were really good recently in the store. So having those for a breakfast or a snack or something like that. Pineapple, love slicing the pineapple and put it in my yogurt or the chia pudding or the oatmeal in the morning. Now, fermented foods can be a diverse source of microbes. We talked about wanting fermented foods to support diversity. I did mention the probiotic supplement VSL number 3 because that has a wide variety of species, but some people will take Lactobacillus acidophilus. They'll just pick it off the shelf and they'll take it. And that's one type out of, probably thousands, because there's trillions of bacteria in our gut. So that doesn't help as far as diversity or richness. So we'd rather that things that have this kombucha can have up to 50 different microbial strains versus a pill supplement. So kombucha is a very nice fermented tea drink that you can have yogurt, kefir, is a great drink. Sauerkraut, love putting that on burgers or something or in salad. Kimchi, tempeh, miso. So these are all great fermented food options, and they're going to give us a lot of great taste and texture and increase the microorganism content of the GI tract, help manage diabetes, cardiovascular disease. It can convert fatty acids to conjugated linoleic acid, which is anti-inflammatory, enhance those vitamins, reduce anti-nutrients such as phytates, so that's nitrates and phytates in those processed foods. Well, hopefully it can help work against those kind of foods and enhance the polyphenols, which are so important from all of our fruits and stuff to help to fight cancer. So here's another interesting study that was done with fermented food versus high fiber. So kind of small, only 36 people in this one, randomly assigned either fermented foods in their diet or supported a high fiber diet. They looked at their microbiome. They looked at a lot of immune profiling. The high fiber diet did change the microbiome function. The fermented foods, they were given either yogurt or kefir or fermented cottage cheese, kimchi, fermented vegetables, kombucha tea, led to an increase in overall microbial diversity. So it is still a good way of increasing that diversity if you're not, so sure that maybe some of the other high fiber foods. So 4 types of immune cells showed less activation in the fermented food group. The levels of 19 inflammatory proteins measured in the blood decreased. One of these being interleukin-6, which has been linked to rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and chronic stress. So it can be very effective, even maybe just adding fermented foods to the diet as a starting point. So Synergy, Pilot Kombucha, those are a couple of brands that I have found that use fruit juice rather than sugar. That can be a significant impact. We always want our natural sugars rather than the added. So keep that in mind. Yogurt drinks like Siggy's, plant-based probiotic yogurt, kefir. There are some probiotic shots. Sunny Culture has a turmeric ginger probiotic shot. Suja has an immunity or digestive shot with turmeric and ginger. And of course, sauerkraut, fermented vegetables, miso, all good ways of getting in more fermented foods. So other influencers on the gut health, replace saturated and trans fats with omega-3 fats, of course. Go out in the sun for short periods of time. We don't want to burn. I just experienced a really bad burn. Not a fun thing to do. We don't want to do that, but we want to support good production of vitamin D. As I mentioned, vitamin D can support gut diversity. It can also support those tight cell junctions in the gut. So keep that in mind as well. Stay hydrated. We talked about how important enough fluid is for all of the fiber that we're going to eat to function correctly. And as I mentioned, changes in the diet can change the microbiome within days and have lasting effect on our health if we develop new habits and keep consistent. So this is something that you can definitely have influence on. And for a lot of people in situations where we don't have a lot of influence on a lot, we don't have, a lot of choices necessarily with treatment or the type of treatment or what we need to do, but this we can change, and we can change easily. So that's my prediction for today. For more resources, actually, I do want to mention that Brandy has her cooking demonstration. She's going to also talk about probiotic rich food, live culture type of foods on July 24th. So next week at 1:00 in person in Boca. Okay. Also over in Gloria Drummond Rehabilitation Center, they have a gut health guide to a happy belly 2-class program held the last 2 Wednesdays of every month from 1:30 to 3. So you can call them up. And again, I always provide the slides so you have The contact number and everything for that, that's 561-955-4396. And then Gloria Drummond also has some very nice classes: Nourish and Thrive, Nutrition Healthy Lifestyle Program, which is a 4-week program. They also have Mindful Eating for a Balanced Life, which is a 2-class program on Wednesdays. So a lot of good resources and a lot of good ways to learn how to kind of have a better and healthier life through nutrition and lifestyle. So thank you all for joining us. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat or the QA box, and I'd be happy to answer. Thank you, Jan.
Oh, there is one, Marie.
Mm-hmm.
You have one in Q&A.
So I have a thank you. You're welcome. Nope, that's not it.
You see it?
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll read it to you. Is it true that you should not mix fruits and veggies together?
No, not necessarily. I don't know why that would be necessary. Fruits and vegetables, I mean, a nice stir fry with peppers and onions and pineapple and shrimp or chicken with some brown rice, I think would be a very healthy food.
I'm thinking of salad, where you put
Salad, yeah, I mean,
berries in a salad.
I've got every salad that I make has either some kind of fruit or pineapple or apples or anything like that. So no, I don't think that's true at all. I don't know of any reason not to do that. In fact, they both have natural enzymes that might help with digestion. So, nope. Any more questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie. And thank you for sharing the education from the Drummond Center. That's really
My pleasure. That came up from our Nutrition Council meeting
yeah.
recently. So just wanted to kind of spread the word.
Yeah, that's very helpful for all of us. And I want everyone to know that this lecture has been recorded. So if you want to re-look at it, or if you have someone that you'd like to share it with, when Lee sends you the evaluation, you can also request a copy of the link to this presentation, and you can pass it on. Marie is always good, very good, about sharing her slides, because I just have to comment, Marie and all of our dietitians just do such amazing deep dive into the research for their particular topics. And as I said in the beginning, it's such valuable information for all of us. So Marie, thank you for all the time and research that you went into putting this together. And then your presentation is always so easy to understand. And yeah, you're getting a few comments. Thank you. Great information on this webinar. Very detailed, good info. Thank you. So yeah, it's very, very
Well,
impressive.
thank you.
Yeah, we're very grateful to you for this good information. And I think it is something that we'd have to get the slides and look back on, because there was a lot of information that I think all of us will need to relook at. So thank you, Marie. And we'd like everyone to know about our upcoming August presentations. Also from our nutrition series will be kitchen toxins, reducing everyday chemical exposure, which also sounds like a very interesting and topic that we all need to know about. That will be presented by Katie Lauterbach, our senior clinical oncology dietitian. And then on Wednesday, August 27th, from our survivorship series, the topic will be exercise for cancer survivors, which will be presented by Becky Kalmus, our exercise physiologist. And let's see, there's some questions there. What day is the kitchen one? So I think that means Brandy's cooking demo. When is that?
Well, the cooking demo is, I'm sorry, is July 24th. But I think you also had kitchen toxins. So do you have the date for the August?
That one. Oh, the kitchen toxin, August 20th. Next
Okay.
Wednesday, August 20th. Okay. Yeah, get all our good education straight here. And you'll also, anybody that's on this mailing list will get an invitation to that lecture as well as soon as we get our flyers. So thank you, Marie. This was fabulous. Thank you, everyone who joined us today at lunchtime. And we'll see you in August.
Everybody have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.